You know, this region has been known, unfortunately, by a phrase that has something to do with cold. And it's not about physical cold, it's actually about relational cold. And maybe you've heard about it. It's called the Seattle freeze. Anybody ever heard of the Seattle freeze? Yeah? Maybe you're new to the area and you're like, people are so nice. They just never wanted to actually do anything with me. That's the Seattle freeze. Where we live in this culture in which we're really nice to people until it requires something of us, right, relationally, where we can smile, we can nod, and then we can move on with our life and pretend like that interaction didn't happen. But what if God designed us to live differently? What if God designed the church, the kingdom of God here on earth, to operate differently than our region? I believe that God has more in store for us here in this region and in this church than what the Pacific Northwest culture can give us. And I believe that it takes us taking practical steps to walk a different life than we see around us. See, I believe that you could spend so much time striving or working, trying to achieve success, that you actually miss out on loving the people and making an impact on the people that God has placed around you. You see, I believe that God has created all of us in his image. And that's one thing that is so awesome about today being today. And I didn't plan this message because it was MLK Day. I didn't plan it because of that. But the reality that so long ago, he was speaking the same thing, that we're all created in God's image. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I also believe that we're all created first and foremost for relationship with God. That he actually designed us to be in friendship with him, and then also that he's designed us to be in relationship and friendship with one another. But so often we allow our sinful worldly culture to impact how we actually relate with one another. But I believe that God has something different and something better in store for us. So he calls us to live a different way. He calls us to live a life of hospitality. Because when we engage in hospitality, we are more than imitators of God. We become participants in God's hospitable life. See, Jesus set an amazing example for us of hospitality. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about living a life in which we have hospitality at home, a life that is full of hospitality in our homes. And some of you, you just had this moment where you were like, hold on a second, Caleb. I haven't told you this yet, but I'm an introvert. I don't do the whole people thing. I like to just, do the nod and walk by. I like to, limit those interactions a bit. It's nice that I can leave all those people at work and then go home to where there aren't people. Any introverts out there in the room? It's okay. Did you know that God created you on purpose? He actually made you an introvert on purpose. Did you know that there's actually amazing gifts of an introvert that makes you incredibly hospitable? Did you know that maybe it may not be an entire party, but it's maybe one person that he's placed in front of you for friendship, for him to use? Maybe you're an extrovert and you're like, hey, I've got this. This is not a problem. People love me. And I love people. And could we just have a huge party where we're all together all the time and nobody ever leaves and we just have an amazing time? And all of the introverts are like, I will never go. I think another one of the beautiful things of being a part of a multicultural church is we actually get to see how different ethnicities look at hospitality in a different way. And there are great things that we can learn from each other when it comes to hospitality and how to love and to treat one another. Maybe you hear this word hospitality, or this idea of having hospitality at home, and you think, I don't have a home. I'm just a college student. I'm in a dorm. Or you think, I'm just in an apartment. Once I get a home, then I'll show hospitality. Then I'll be able to invite people over, and I can't wait. But it may be like another 100 years because I've got to save up for the rest of my life before I can buy one. Maybe you have reached retirement age and you're in a retirement facility and you're like, I can't do hospitality like I used to. See, I believe that no matter where we're at, no matter what life stage, whether you're a student or a single elderly adult, God is not done with you. God calls you to live a hospitable life. And Jesus set the example for us. Let's look at just flyby of Jesus' life and just some high points of his amazing life of hospitality. The first miracle he did was at a wedding where his mom was like, Jesus, they're out of wine. You got to do something. And he's like, hold on a second. Not sure we're going there yet. But then he ends up honoring his mother and turning water into wine, and everybody celebrated because of this amazing miracle. You see Jesus feeding 5,000 people. That's a lot of people. 5,000. Well, it says 5,000 men, which means it was probably more than that. It was probably 5,000 men, lots and lots of women, and lots of children. There's a lot of people there. And Jesus, the great host, feeds them all. See, Jesus' last meal with his disciples, which we partook in today as we did communion, was this Passover meal in which there's hosting, there's hospitality, there's the presence of Jesus in their midst because he was there. But how cool is it that when we do it here together, Jesus is in our midst as well? And then we see Jesus, after he's resurrected, he forgives Peter who denied him. And what does he do? He could have just been like, Jesus shows up and he's like, hey, Peter, it's okay. I forgive you. But what does he do? He makes him a meal. And he forgives him over that meal. The Bible is full. This is like just a few in Jesus' ministry, let alone the entire Bible, is full of examples of living a life of hospitality at home, of living this hospitable life in which we welcome people to the table, we welcome people into our life, we welcome people into our presence, we welcome people into the presence of Jesus in our homes. So number one, I wanted to say, you can't wait. You can't wait until conditions are perfect. Because I think sometimes we want to think that way. We're like, I've just got to make it past this hurdle, or I've just got to get to here, or I've just got to do this, or I've just got to do that. And then I'll be ready to host somebody. And all the introverts were like, no, I still won't be ready. But the reality is if you don't take practical action and steps to being hospitable now, you'll never take the action later. See, God calls us to be like him. And he, first and foremost, was our great host. So he calls us to be like him. And when we create opportunities where people experience hospitality in our home, it opens the door for people to recognize not our hospitality, but ultimately they recognize the hospitality of Jesus. So number one, I want you to all take a big breath. You can do this. It doesn't have to look the same. But today my hope is that throughout this message, something stands out to you that says, I could start there. I want to look at three different areas, three different places in which the Bible describes showing hospitality in our homes. And I want to start with one of the most probably, I don't know, for me, it's probably the most difficult. And for you, I met somebody after service, they're like, oh, that one's easy, and that's the beauty of the church is each person has your own gifts. One of these is going to be the easiest for one of you, right? But the first one is one of probably the more difficult ones for me, and it's welcoming the foreigner and the stranger. All throughout Scripture, we see God being concerned about the foreigner and the stranger in the land. And he encourages people to live a life of hospitality to those that it's not their home. And this is the person that's not expected. This is the person that's like you weren't ready for. It wasn't convenient. It wasn't like it's been on your calendar for a long time and you've like, we're prepared. The fridge is stocked, the meal's prepared. Please come, right? This isn't somebody that you've been expecting, but this is somebody that it's a surprise. It's not a part of what you were thinking. It's an interruption. And how often do we like interruptions? I don't know about you, but interruptions are kind of annoying. I don't know if you've experienced that feeling when you get interrupted. You're like, hold on a second, I'm doing something, and when I'm done, then I can pay attention to you. And yet, Jesus calls us to live a life where we're open for interruptions and inconveniences for the sake of people. It says this in Deuteronomy 10. It says, you are to love those who are foreigners. Some versions say strangers. For you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. What I love about this is when we recognize that at some point we all were a foreigner in the land that we now live. In this area, everybody's from somewhere else. But what's so cool is that when we come together, when we recognize that we ourselves were once foreigners, when we recognize that we ourselves are actually foreigners even to this earth. So even if you've lived in the same house your entire life, you're actually not, you're a part of the kingdom that is different. Your true home is in heaven. And so you're a foreigner here on earth. When you recognize that we're all foreigners, then you treat the people that are around you that are foreigners differently. The Bible talks about treating those the way that you would want to be treated, right? So who is this person? Who's this foreigner? For some of us, maybe it's the person that's the contractor at your door that you don't know. And it's simply going, hey, I know you're on the job a lot. Like, do you need to go to the bathroom? Like, you can use my bathroom. Do you need a cup of water? I had somebody in the heat of last summer who was replacing a windshield on one of my vehicles, and his water bottle was empty, and I saw him he's on his last drop, and I was like, can I refill that for you? Like, we're not talking about having to do something crazy. We're talking about just simple hospitality. Because Hebrews 13:2 says this, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. I think for many of us, the idea of showing hospitality of angels is a new concept. You're like, never thought about that before. I've never thought of ever doing that before. I didn't know that was possible. But I remember growing up, my mom would do some things that as a kid, I was like, Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, that feels a little sketchy. We don't know that person, and she's, buying them a meal, or she's doing this, or she's doing that, giving somebody a ride. And to me as a kid, I was like, this is a little sketchy, Mom. But she had this view in her life that she was going to treat each person like they were valuable. She was going to do her best to take care of the needs of the people that God put in front of her. And there was times where she would look back and she would say, there was somebody there just a second ago and now they're not. I think I just showed hospitality to an angel. And I was like, I couldn't disprove her on it, okay? Like, I wasn't like going to try to argue with her. But the reality is that when you live life like each person was valuable, like even if you don't even believe in angels, but if you treated each person like they actually were valuable and meaningful and had an identity that meant something to God, then you would treat each person differently. My family had this weird skill. Well, I don't know if it was my family or primarily my dad. He would make strangers friends very quickly. Some people have said the statements of, I've never met a stranger, because within a little bit, all of a sudden they're friends. And there's this company that they used to exist. They've changed their name now. I just learned this last night as I was looking it up. But this company drives these yellow vehicles of frozen goods around to houses where you could buy them. And in Montana, this was a big deal because they would literally come to your house. It was crazy. Like a vehicle full of frozen food drove up to your house and you could buy what you wanted out of it. Mind-blowing. Number one, ice cream. Come on. Ice cream. So within a little bit, somehow every single one of this company called Schwann's, ever heard of it? You may or may not have. Schwann's people would come with food, and by the end of their first or second visit, they were like family. I don't know how it happened, but there was this one specific man who he actually changed his entire route so that he could end at our house. And he would stop, and I'm pretty sure he would throw some extra ice cream, like free ice cream at my parents, and that's probably why they were so nice to him. But he would end his whole route at our house so that he could have dinner with us. And then we watched Monday Night Football. And every month, this guy would come and he'd eat dinner with us and we'd watch Monday Night Football. He'd eat dinner with us, we'd watch Monday Night Football. And then I was pretty young, but I started to recognize how the conversation started to change and how he started to open up about what was going on in his life. And my parents were able to encourage him. They were able to share Jesus with him while watching football. And as time went on, he became just a part of our family. And who knows who you're missing out on adding not only value to your family, but you adding value to theirs by being stingy with your hospitality. See, we need to slow down in our busy, fast-paced, achievement-driven, goal-setting culture. We need to slow down. We need to notice the people that God puts in front of us and ask the question, God, why did you put this person in my path? Is there a reason? Is there something you want to use me to say? Is there a need that they have that you want me to fulfill? And listen to them and look for ways to show them kindness. And as you do this, you'll have opportunities to not just meet somebody's needs, but to introduce strangers to Jesus. And again, I just want to say, it doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to do illogical things, dangerous things. It can be simply giving somebody a glass of water. Could you do that? Is that you could do that, right? Maybe you have a container of water bottles in your vehicle that you can give to people that stand on the side of the road. It's a simple thing, but who knows how God could use that in somebody's life to meet somebody's needs, to take care of somebody. The second one, I think, is a little bit easier for many of us. The second one is that we are to welcome our neighbor. You see, Jesus, he simplified the whole law, the whole Old Testament Torah, into two pretty simple things. The first one is love God, and then he said, love your neighbor. In our next question is often asked because we want to get out of doing it. Well, who's our neighbor? Because if they're not our neighbor, then we don't have to love them, right? Unfortunately, he said you not only have to love your neighbor, but you have to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. But Jesus also told this story to answer that question. Who is your neighbor, right? And many of you have heard this story, so I'm not going to tell it all in great detail, but there was a man who was walking down a path, and it was beaten up, and his clothes and his things were taken from him, and he was left for dead. And there was two people of the same ethnicity that walked past him, and they were religious people. Religious people are the worst. They walked past him, and rather than taking care of his needs, rather than helping him, they said, I'm too busy. I've got stuff going on. Have you ever been that person? Too busy, got stuff going on? And then somebody who is of a different culture, of a different faith, walks by and says, I don't care that this man is different than I am. I'm going to treat him with love, respect, hospitality. I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to bandage up his wounds. I'm going to pay for his medical bills. And Jesus asked the question, who do you think is his neighbor? The reality is that in that definition, it's not a matter of proximity, it's a matter of heart, who your neighbor is. Is your heart big enough to surpass just the person that lives next to you as your neighbor? And could it include somebody of a different culture? Could it include somebody of a different ethnicity? Could it include somebody of a different faith walk? Could it include somebody from somewhere far different than you? Would you be willing to welcome and host somebody that believes something completely different than you, that could actually be hostile towards you for your beliefs? You see, Jesus ate with these types of people. Jesus ate with his neighbors. In Mark 2, it says, when the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and the tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Seems like a good question from a religious person. On hearing this, Jesus said to them, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. I want to propose to you that your home is actually a powerful place of evangelism. That hospitality within your home is actually a tool that God wants to use to reach and transform our region. And it begins first with our family, right? Discipling, teaching our children, loving our children, taking care of their needs, but then it includes taking that and teaching them how to love, take care of other people's needs by showing hospitality. And in those moments, not only will you see God show up, your kids will see God show up, and the people who you invite into your home will see God show up. If you're only willing to open your heart, open your door, open your table. And again, Jesus made this challenge even more difficult because he said not just loving your neighbor, but he said loving your enemies as well. He went on to challenge us with some words that I think we could all maybe cringe a little bit at because we've been on the other side. He says this, he says, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? He's saying if you just love the people that love you, that's easy. Why do something more difficult. Love somebody who doesn't love you. Because ultimately that's what he did for us. He loved us before we ever loved him. And then he says, if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? He's saying, look outside of your friend's circle. Look outside of the people that you like. Look outside of your little sphere and notice the people that I've placed around you. Notice the people that need your encouragement. Notice the people that need your friendship. Notice the people that are asking questions. They just need somebody to listen to them. He's asking you to listen. See, building intentional, meaningful, trusting relationships give you the space to share Jesus. For me, I like to find a common interest with somebody. And if there is no common interest, I find something they're interested in, and I do the work to actually study it and learn something about it. So that the next time I talk to them, I have something meaningful to add or to talk or to ask a question about. Are you curious about people? Are you curious about things that you don't know? Are you curious about interests that are different than your own? And then I try to listen to what the desires of somebody's heart is and discover what are they searching for. And ultimately, that's where you have an opportunity to share Jesus, when their desire, their need, what they're feeling meets what only Jesus can bring. I've told many of you this story before, but I'd like to share it again about a friend of mine. His name is Jim. When I met Jim, he was the type of person that he said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe that there's a God. I don't believe, it's how I was raised. My dad was a secular Jew. My mom previously was Catholic, and then she became an atheist. And, life has just shown me that that's the truth. And I didn't have a lot of commonalities with him. He cursed a lot. Like I was to the point where I was like, there's got to be another word that you could use to describe the feeling that you're feeling right now. Have you ever had a friend like that? And he lived in the apartment building that my wife and I lived in, and I was just was like, okay, God, this is weird that you brought him into my life, because it was through a crazy circumstance. And I was like, what are you doing here? Because we're very, very, very different. He's really tech savvy. He's a dog lover, and I love cats. No, I'm just kidding. I don't love cats. But I also am not a big dog lover either. I love your dogs in your home, being fed by your paycheck. I love my children. Please don't leave the church. Okay. But we didn't have a lot of interests, right? And in common. But I finally found one, all right? And please stick with me here. I know. It was Mario Kart. It was Mario Kart, okay? And you got to do what you got to do for Jesus, all right? And if that means play Mario Kart, you play Mario Kart. That was a joke, people. So, that's how it started. We would play Mario Kart, and that was about it. It was kind of like we'd hang out and we'd play Mario Kart. And then, conversations started shifting a little bit. And he started to ask me questions about, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you believe about this? And over time, just by loving him playing Mario Kart, those questions kept coming. And I was like, God, what are you doing? There's something, you're doing something. And this was 10 years ago. So I'm not telling you that this is a quick fix. If you're looking for a quick fix and a quick, one and done, we're moving on, this is a lifestyle that you have to commit to see lives changed. And at that point, he was dating one girl. They ended up breaking up, and then over the years, it was another one and another one and another one. And I just began to kind of become numb to meeting these new women and then them not being a part of his life. And I wanted something more for him. And I was praying for him. And then during COVID, he said, hey, I've got this new girlfriend. Her name's Mary. And I really like her. was like, well, come on over for dinner. And so we had Jim and Mary over for dinner. And the conversations were different. It was not just thinking about his own needs. He was looking towards the future. And he was asking questions still about God. And I was just, God, what are you doing here? What is happening? And then later that month, he sends me a text and he goes, I'm going to read the Bible this year, front to back. He's like, I'm going to start in Genesis. And I was like, good luck. And every once in a while, I'd get these text messages from him. I've just finished Genesis. I'm moving on. And then, one of my favorites was like, the David and Goliath story. What a letdown. He's like, it was over in like 2 seconds. It's like in society, it's like this big story, like David versus Goliath. And he's like, he literally just slung a stone and it was over. Like, what? He's like, what a letdown. And I loved hearing the Bible from his perspective. And he'd ask questions and he would tell me what things stood out to him. And all of a sudden I noticed that it stopped being like, is God? And then he's like, I think God must be, and I was like, wait a second. Is this guy following Jesus? And then he sends me a text, hey, me and Mary, we're going to get married and we're going to move to Montana. And I was like, God, what are you doing? Like, I've spent 10 years loving this guy. Like, what are you doing? Like, I feel like we were just this close. He was almost going to follow you. And I just felt like God said, it's okay. I've got him. And needless to say, he moves to Montana, and his neighbor is a youth pastor at a local church. And on our way back from Montana in November, we were able to stop and visit him in his home with his wife, Mary, and their child on the way. And now he's got 2 dogs. And it was mind-blowing to sit in a room with a man that once every other word was a curse word, to not hear a curse word once. Not that that's the mark of success. But as he described what Jesus had done in his life, as he describes how he wants his home to be different than the home he grew up in, how he wants his child to grow up in the church and to follow Jesus, and how they've made a decision to follow Jesus. We're talking 10 years, people. 10 years of faithful hospitality, of listening to people, loving your neighbor, welcoming them, finding common ground. And he said, thank you. He said, there's probably a lot of times when you were wondering why you were friends with me. He said, but thank you for being my friend, for showing me Jesus. And it's not about me, but I'm telling you, it literally was just Mario Kart and conversations. Even you guys can do that. Consistent hospitality creates space for people to come to know Jesus. And when people see that Jesus is real to you, they think maybe Jesus could be real for me too. People want to know that it's real. They don't want fake Jesus. I don't want fake Jesus. Evergreen Church doesn't want fake Jesus. We want to know that Jesus is real for you, and that's when transformation happens, because they experience the real Jesus in your home. They see Jesus in you. See, God can use whatever stage of life you're in right now. We could all look at our lives and go, there are 10 excuses why I couldn't host somebody. There's 10 reasons why I couldn't make somebody tea or make them coffee and have them over for a few minutes. But would you take a risk and include somebody? Open your heart, open your home to the people that are around you. The final way is that we can love and welcome our church family. See, as a church, we actually do this really well here in this room. Like, we host people so well. It is one thing that Evergreen Church has been graced by God to do well. We see it at Alpha, we see it at Christmas lights, we see it anytime we have a guest speaker. They're just blown away by the hospitality of Evergreen Church. And can I say, well done, Evergreen Church. But I think it's about time that this moves beyond these four walls and it becomes a core staple part of our homes, our community. We need to become community builders in this region to bring people to know Jesus Christ. But it begins with welcoming people from your church family. This is a common practice in the early church of just welcoming and loving the church into our home. It says this in Acts 2. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. And they broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. See, when you invite your church family into your home, you open the door for God to use you to encourage somebody else, as well as to be encouraged by someone else's faith. When you invite people into your home, your children not only see your faith in real life, but they see the faith of other people being expressed in your home through stories of what God has done, through prayers that are prayed and answers to prayer that happen. This is one of the ways in which we disciple and our kids experience our faith in our home. This is one of the reasons why I encourage you to consider hosting an Evergreen group. What I love about, we were able to host a group last year. And what I loved seeing was, number one, our kids got to make friends. They got to have fun together. They got to laugh. And every week they were saying, are they coming over again? Are they coming over again? And then I was encouraged by Phil. Yeah, you encouraged me. He was at my house a few times for a small group. And this is a man of wisdom. And I got to learn from him. We're not the same generation, but I got to learn from you. Right? How cool is that? When we get to experience faith from somebody from different cultures, somebody from different generations, and now our faith is encouraged, our faith is strengthened, our home is blessed by hosting. My family loved having people over for dinner, and we'd often have people from the church over, and it's like dinner ends, and I don't know if your families were like this, but it was like 3 hours later when the stories stopped because people could no longer feel their bodies because they'd situated themselves in the seat as many ways possible to like keep blood flowing through their bodies. We seriously would sit there for 3 hours, and my dad would start with funny stories of college about lifting a VW bug and setting it in front of dorm doors or stringing things up flagpoles or breaking bones. It always starts with funny stories, and then all of a sudden it shifts. And now I'm hearing stories about how faith is real to my parents. I'm hearing stories of how God has shown up in other people's lives. And as a child, I grew up in a home where around that table, I was encouraged. I was strengthened in my faith. From a young age, I got to see this happen. Did you know that your home, your table, your love is a powerful, powerful discipleship tool that God wants to use to strengthen your home, to strengthen your friends, to strengthen this church. So I want to ask you a simple question. How could you prepare your home for hospitality this year? I'm not talking about adding on an addition, unless that's what you want to do. I'm not talking about selling and buying a new house so that you can host more people, unless that's what God tells you to do. I'm not telling you to do anything crazy, but think about what is one simple practical thing that you could do to be ready to host people this year. Maybe you're a tea drinker, and so it's having tea on hand that you can make for people, or having coffee on hand that you could say, hey, would you like a cup of coffee that I could make for you, is because you're in my home. Maybe it's, you can't make cookies, and so you go to the store and you buy the pre-made cookie dough that you can put in the freezer and have it ready so that if somebody was to walk into your door, you could make cookies so that they could eat them and enjoy them in your home. And maybe you're like, I can't bake cookies. I don't have any baking sheets. Maybe it's buying a baking sheet so that you can make cookies to welcome people into your home. It doesn't have to be crazy. It just is intentional in your heart, being prepared, being ready that you might show hospitality. You might show the love of Jesus to the people that are around you. Let's become community builders in this region. Let's become people that create community that is different than the community that's around us, that cares genuinely about the people that are around us, that makes time and space in our lives for inconvenience, for love to abound, for Jesus to be made known, for people to experience new life. Let's be people who create community in this region. So I want to ask you, this is the second follow-up, the final question, is who is one person you could host this month? It doesn't have to be an elaborate meal unless that's you love to do that. Maybe it's simply tea. And if you're not comfortable having people in your home, maybe it is going to a coffee shop and having a coffee with somebody. But who is one person, whether it's in this room, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's the cashier at your grocery store, who is one person that you could host this month? Then let's not just think, well, that's a good idea, Caleb, and then never do it. Let's take practical steps together in loving the people that God has placed around us, in hosting the people that God has placed around us. Your lives will be richer. Your faith will be expanded. You'll be challenged in ways you've never been challenged before. Your prayers will change. Everything in your life will change when you commit to host and love people. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I thank you for this incredibly hospitable church. And Lord, I pray that you would increase in each one of us our love for one another. Increase our love for the people that are here in this room with us. Increase our love for the people that are in our neighborhood, the people that we see around us. Increase our love for the stranger, the person who is not from here, the person who doesn't belong, the person who is alone. God, would you increase our love for the people that you've placed around us? Let us walk slowly with you. Let us walk humbly with you. Let us walk prepared with you to welcome, to host, to love, to encourage, to strengthen, to meet the needs of the people that you put in our path. And Lord, I do pray that Evergreen Church would be known even more than it is right now for its hospitality. And would we see the culture shift in this area because we took risks, we took practical steps of hospitality in our communities around us. Would you transform our world? Would you bring your kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven? In Jesus' name, amen.